here too, we try to help with other numbers. So Turkey is the main host country with a total of 3.5 million migrants, refugees and asylum seekers. Pakistan and Uganda each took 1.4 million people. Among the European countries, Germany is hosting 900,000 people. As the 2019 UNHCR report shows, forced displacement today affects more than 1% of the world's population, 1 in 97, while the number of those who manage to return home continues to decline. So, the UNHCR data revealed that for the 80 million people on the move, which is the highest figure ever recorded, it's increasingly difficult to return home. And compare this data with the past one. In the 1990s, an average of 1.5 million refugees managed to return home each year. In the last 10 years, the average has collapsed to about 380,000. A figure that testifies that today, the increase in the number of people forced to flee far exceeds that of people who managed to find a solution. So, some data on people on the move. At least 100 million people have been forced to flee their homes in the last 10 years in search of safety inside or outside their countries. The number of people fleeing has almost doubled in the last 10 years. More than 3/4 of the world's refugees, 77%, come from long-term crisis scenarios. More than 8 in 10 refugees, as we saw before, 85%, are living in developing countries, usually in countries bordering the one they fled from. 2/3 of the people fleeing abroad come from 5 countries: Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar. So we have seen through official data that what is perceived as an invasion by European public opinion is actually not. And that the vast majority of people on the move live in developing countries or in countries that have many structural problems.
You mentioned Syria, you mentioned Afghanistan, and all these countries are, on the one hand, are strongly affected by the aggressive policies of their neighbors. I think about Turkey, for instance.
So they accept to repatriate migrants who do not come from the mainland. Having an asylum request answered can take a year, even 2, in case of appeal. And if the people awaiting a response cannot leave the islands and the flow doesn't stop, the islands are bound to explode, like now. Thus, the islands become a bottleneck and the situation in the hotspot is unsustainable until the tragedies of recent months, like the Moria hotspot in Lesbos, which has been destroyed by fire months ago. So, to face the crisis of 2015, the European response, the strategy to cope with that phenomenon was an agreement with Turkey. Money in exchange for border protection, money in exchange for the externalization of borders. From a numerical point of view, the European strategy worked. Last year, an average of 2,500 people arrived in Lesbos a month, much less than the 10,000 who arrived in a single day in the midst of the crisis in 2015. But people who have arrived on the Greek islands of Chios, Leros, Samos, Kos, and Lesbos, of course, are now trapped, blocked by the slowness and complexity of an asylum application procedure. Months, years in which the lives of thousands of people remain suspended, waiting for an evaluation on an island that has become the frontier of Europe